Welcome to Debate and Discussion, a podcast presented by Xavier Newswire. I'm your host, Erin Albright. During the episode, I will be joined by guests who will debate a controversial topic relating to Xavier or current events. Today's topic is the performance of the Xavier men's basketball team. Let's hear from our reporter, Grace Carlo, with a recap of the team's season.
As of Monday, March 1st, Xavier men's basketball has had a productive season with 13 wins and 5 losses. After 7 games were postponed during the season, the team sits with a 6-5 record in the Big East. Their season began when the Musketeers hosted a multi-team event called the Xavier Invitational at the Cintas Center from November 25th through the 27th. Xavier capitalized on all 3 games, winning 101-49 against Oakland, 51-50 against Bradley, and 76-73 versus Toledo. Xavier hosted Eastern Kentucky for its official season opener on November 30th. It was a close 99-96 overtime win for the Musketeers. The game featured 5 lead changes and 9 ties. The next game on December 2nd was a 79-48 win against Tennessee Tech. Xavier's first big test of the season took place on December 6th when they took on Cincinnati in the annual Crosstown Shootout. Xavier took their second straight win in the rivalry, defeating Cincinnati 77-69 on UC's home court. Following the Crosstown Shootout, Xavier concluded their non-conference schedule by hosting Oklahoma in the Big East 12 Challenge on December 9th. Xavier knocked off the Sooners 99-77. After the Oklahoma game, the Musketeers began the Big East play on December 20th when they hosted Marquette and won 91-88. Just a few days later, they traveled to Nebraska to play Creighton on December 23rd. Xavier lost in a close 61-66 game, ruining their perfect record. Following the Creighton game, Xavier lost to Seton Hall on December 30th at home. The final score was 85-68. Sophomore Zach Fremantle scored a game-high 20 points on 8 for 16 shooting. This was his 4th 20-point performance of the season. A week later, Xavier hosted St. John's on January 6th, winning 69-61. The Muskies then took on Providence January 10th with a 74-73 buzzer beater win. Freshman Colby Jones scored the game-winning three-pointer with less than 1 second left on the clock. Xavier then experienced a rise in COVID cases within their program and had the next 4 games against Villanova, Seton Hall, University of Connecticut, and Georgetown postponed. The team got back on the court January 30th, beating Butler on the road 68-55 and moving Xavier's record to 11 wins and 2 losses overall. The following 3 games against DePaul, Villanova, and DePaul again were postponed due to COVID. Xavier resumed their season on February 13th, hosting UConn. The Muskies lost to the Huskies 72-80. On February 16th, Xavier hit the road, traveling to New York to face St. John's. The Musketeers lost 84-93. Jones finished with 20 points, a new career high for the freshman. Xavier then hosted Butler on February 21st and won 63-51. Followed by a road loss to the Providence Friars. On Saturday night, Xavier beat number 13 Creighton at home with a final score of 77-69. As all eyes turn towards the March Madness Selection Committee, Xavier will play its final 2 games of the regular season on the road against Georgetown and Marquette. The Musketeers traveled to D.C. on Monday, and they will return to the Midwest to face Marquette on Saturday. Xavier has a chance of making the coveted March Madness tournament, though they have not punched their ticket just yet. According to ESPN bracketologist Joe Lenardi, Xavier sits right on the bubble, as he lists the Musketeers among the last 4 in, with fellow Big East team UConn. Yesterday's CBS bracketology expert Jerry Palm listed Xavier solidly in the tournament as 8th seed. Meanwhile, some stat-based predictions like Iowa's Press, a data-driven metric, lists the Xavier Musketeers on the outside of the NCAA tournament looking in. Whether or not Xavier makes the tournament will likely come down to their final 2 games this week, both of which will be played without graduate transfer and standout sharpshooter Nate Johnson.
Thanks, Grace. Here to debate tonight, we have Joe Clark and Ethan Brosnan. Joe is the sports news editor for Xavier Newswire, and Ethan is a sophomore health services administration major. So let's talk about, how would you rate the Musketeers season so far, guys?
I'd say they're right on track to where everybody thought they'd be at this point in the year. I mean, everybody thought they'd be fighting on the bubble going into the last few weeks of the season for the most part. I mean, and that's where they are. What wasn't expected was the COVID pauses, and I think that set them back a little bit. But they can't make an excuse for that, and they'll be the first ones to tell you because every team's dealing with it. It's not something to be excused. The general theme coming off those pauses has been a terrible defensive team in the first few games, and that's really been their key issue. Against Creighton, though, they played probably the best defense they played all year, and that was without Nate Johnson, who's been their best defender. And I think right now they're in the tournament. If the season ended today, they'd make it. So I think they're doing well. They're fine.
I'd have to pretty much agree with Joe. A lot of experts did have Xavier men's basketball finishing around middle of the pack. They performed pretty well last game against Creighton. Really well defensive game, especially from Jason Carter. It sucked not having Nate Johnson, but the freshmen, Colby Jones and company, were able to pick up the slack for the Musketeers. And it's going to be a nice win on the resume, especially heading into March.
Would you say this season was above average, below average, or just about average for Xavier's team?
I mean, given Xavier's standards, I guess you just say just about average. But when you look at what they had coming in with 3 freshmen getting significant playing time, and really all of them are stepping up, they look like they're going to be major contributors down the line. Zach Freeman's in a sophomore year turning into an all-conference player, and then Paul Scruggs just being Paul Scruggs. Given their circumstances, I think it's probably slightly above average. Obviously, Xavier's got a reputation to uphold of being a really good basketball school. Being on the bubble is not really something they're always used to. But I think given what they had coming into this year, that I'd say slightly above average.
Before I came to this school, I knew that Xavier, the culture around basketball was pretty big, and the expectations are always really high year in and year out. I think one year, the year they made the miracle run to the Elite Eight, that's when they had a little bit of a down year. But I know this school and this city expects always going into the tournament being a pretty decent high seed. I would just say that what really helped them this year was definitely the leadership step up from Paul Scruggs and him shooting a lot better than he did last year. Fremantle stepping up, I think he will probably be the most improved player on this team, statistically and just as a team leader. I really like the freshmen stepping up, Dwan Odom, Colby Jones, CJ Wilcher starting to pick up the slack. It's been a lot of help to also have Brian Griffin, Nate Johnson, and Adam Kunkel to transfer over. So I'd say that this is a pretty above average season, but Xavier's definitely accustomed to doing a lot better.
Yeah, I agree. So do you think Xavier will make March Madness this year?
They really just have to win one of their next 2 games, which is, if they don't, then honestly, I don't think they deserve to make it. I think they will make it. They're in the tournament now. Georgetown's a tough team tomorrow night, and it's their senior night. So I'm a little bit nervous about that game, but Marquette's not very good across the board. I think they should roll Marquette on Saturday. If they lose both of those games, they're going to have to do some work in the Big East tournament. And if they lose both those games, there's a chance they get the 6th seed, and they'd have to play on Wednesday night. They don't get a bye. If they just have to win one of the next games, and they get a bye in the Big East tournament. So hopefully they just win one of the next 2 games, and they're safe to going into the tournament, or going into Selection Sunday.
If we keep on playing like we did on Saturday offensively and we can keep improving defensively, I think they should make the tournament and possibly even win a couple games if we're good. What can really hurt us is losing the next game, like Joe said. If we lose to Marquette and Georgetown, I don't think they'll probably take us out of the tournament. It'll be tough. We'll have to probably win the Big East tournament to really get a good shot at getting in there. The Georgetown game, they are big in size. I know Travis Steele in his interview discussed that they do play pretty fast. Not to the tempo of Creighton, but it seems like it. They have a lot of big guys, especially with Blair, their guard. He's a prolific three-point shooter. Marquette, they do have a big size. They've had some issues, obviously going like 11-13 this year, but they did give us a run the last time we played them, so I wouldn't count them out, but these next 2 games, they should be winnable with the squad that we have, and if we keep on playing like we are right now, we should be looking good for March Madness.
Yeah, definitely. What are some areas you think the team should look to improve on moving forward?
Definitely defense. I mean, shooting-wise, they can shoot the ball, and that's not really something you can improve per se. Like, you can shoot or you can't. They showed against Oklahoma. They've showed in other games. Even against Creighton, they showed they can shoot the ball. Offense isn't really a major issue. The defense is an issue, and defense is really an effort thing. It's not. It's really all it is. They know the defense at this point in the season. When you looked at that St. John's game that they lost and the Providence game they lost, what was lacking is they weren't closing out on shooters. They weren't switching right. The bigs would go to hedge, and they'd leave a guy open for 3. And a lot of that, too, was the game plan, especially against St. John's early. They knew some guys weren't good shooters, so they left them open and they hit some shots. Nothing you can do about that, but then you have to adjust, and they didn't adjust. And there's one play in the Providence game that was really defining. When Kunkel and Carter went to hedge, they left Noah Horkler wide open. They fouled him. They hit a three. Against Creighton, everybody, especially Dwan Odom was really, really good on-ball defender, aggressive. Jason Carter, like Ethan said, was really good in the interior on Sunday. And everybody stepped up. I mean, Steele's been saying all year long that Kiki Tandy and CJ Wilcher had or more playing time. They have to do on the defensive side of the ball, and they did. The whole team across the board on Saturday was really good on defense. If they play like that going forward, and that's a big if, then I think they'll be fine. I think they'll win a few games in the tournament. But that's the number one thing they definitely have to improve on from not Creighton, but the games prior to that.
I would say I'd have to agree with Joe as well. That defense does need to improve by a lot. I mean, we got blown out by St. John's and then blown out on the road against Providence. We left a lot of shooters open, and then offensively, we weren't able to drive, which is our big thing, especially when we need to kick out to the open shooter. We couldn't find those guys open. Also, our ball movement during those games were also pretty slow. It seemed like guys were playing one-on-one basketball, not passing it enough, taking some pretty questionable shots, especially from deep. And that really hurt us in those two games that we probably should be able to win. I would say if they're able to fix up their defensive hiccups, we should be doing pretty well, especially if Jason Carter keeps playing the way he does. Zach Freemantle keeps stepping up. It does hurt that Nate Johnson is gone. We do lose a really good perimeter defender. But we're looking for guys like Colby Jones, Dwan Odom to step up. Adam Kunkel has shown he has the ability to play defense when he wants to, and he needs to step that up. CJ Wilcher also can be a decent defender. Need him to step up. And it's good to have Brian Griffin back as well. He was in the quarantine process, so it's nice to have a guy that's very lengthy, have a shot blocking ability, and a guy that finishes at around 60% down low on the offensive side. So I think we have that as well. We need also a little more production from our bench with Kiki Tandy. He has been a little streaky this year in terms of playing time. Apparently, he's also had a nagging injury that's he had from last season as well. So I think if Steele's able to kind of give him a defined role, I think he could be the big X factor to come off our bench. He shoots well from three, around like 35%. So we can keep him going at a consistent rate. I think that'd be good for our team. I'd also like to see Kiki attack more on the inside, especially him to get to the line. He's a lights-out shooter from the free throw line. He also is very creative and crafty with his moves to the rim. So I'd like to see Travis Steele to see if they can incorporate Kiki Tandy a little bit more in the lineup.
Yeah, definitely. How is Xavier's incoming recruiting class for the 2021-2022 season looking for next year?
It's good. They filled their holes from what they have losing this year. Jason Carter's 99%, I think, going to leave after this year. I mean, he has the option to stay. Everybody has the option to stay another year because of COVID this year, but he's going to have his MBA. He's going to be like 23 years old. I think he's probably gone. And then that's a huge hole in their interior depth. Brian Griffin might stay. He might not. But either way, they're pretty unproven in the front court. So Cesar Edwards, he's 6'11". He's a really skilled rebounder. He can shoot it from three. He can create a little bit. He's similar to Zach Freemantle in that way. And he can score on the inside and just defend down low. Then Elijah Tucker, he's a little bit smaller. He's like 6'8", 6'9". At the 4 spot. He's going to be he's tough. He's going to be a good interior presence for Xavier. I mean, they need guys who are just tough inside. That's what Brian Griffin is this year. Jason Carter is a little bit to an extent. They seem like guys who are dogs who are just going to defend inside, not give up easy points, and that's kind of what Tucker's going to be. And he's skilled offensively too. He can score a bit. I think next year's a good recruiting class. This year, they really focus on the wing depth and the guard depth, and they got that. And next year is going to be the bigs, and then even the year after, they're going to have to go back to get some guards. But they've done a really good job under Steele and plugging in and filling their holes on the recruiting trail.
I like the recruiting class they got coming in with Edwards and Tucker, especially with Jason Carter. I think he's possibly going to leave. And then, as Joe said, Brian Griffin might have the ability to leave as well. I think the recruiting class does fix up some holes. Cesar Edwards is going to be a nice get. Very tall guy, score inside, and as Joe said, can shoot threes. And I think we've seen that in some games this year. When we play a lot bigger teams such as Marquette, Georgetown, and UConn, they have some really big centers and forwards, and it's going to be tough to play against them and drive down low and defend on defense. So if we get some big guys in the recruiting class, it's going to help a lot on defense and offense, especially with some guys leaving. And the last recruiting class, we shored up a lot of guard depth, especially when we added Wilcher Jones and Dwan. That helped us a lot, and the reason why we're doing so well this year. And I think it's just going to be a big help going forward, especially if we have a young guy like Cesar Edwards just going to be there for all 4 years, hopefully.
Thanks, Joe and Ethan. Now let's briefly hear from a few other students.
I think that Xavier will be in the NCAA tournament, and I think they will go to the Sweet 16.
We've been good, not great at times for very clear and obvious reasons. I think we should make the tournament, but first round win the Big East would guarantee us a spot in the national tournament, I believe. Depending on who we face in the first round, would like a first round win. Not entirely confident in that though. I feel like against bigger teams, despite the fact that we beat Creighton, we don't always play at our best level.
I think Xavier will make the March Madness tournament after their big win over Creighton the other day. And I think if they win one of these next games against Georgetown or Marquette, they'll make the tournament. And it also depends how we do in the Big East tournament. But I think we'll make it to the Sweet 16, hopefully.
So I think Xavier basketball has, had a really successful season. I think they just had a huge win over Creighton, which will really help them in terms of where they will be placed in the bracket. And I would think they're probably going to win, 1 or 2 or 3 games in the tournament.
Let's transition to a short discussion about March Madness and who we think will win it all. Joe, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll start. Might be an easy answer because they're the only defeated team in the country right now, but I'm going to go with Gonzaga. They've proven it against high major opponents. They have a really, really good big in Drew Tam. They have a great shooter in Corey Kispert. The whole team can shoot the heck out of the ball. And then just watching Jalen Suggs move the ball is just a marvel. He started out the year as probably the best player in college basketball. He was so fun to watch. But just all around, that Gonzaga team is loaded. I really just don't see anybody that can beat them in come March, but it's March and anything can happen, so who knows?
I know the favorite pick is like Gonzaga and Baylor, but I'm always like adamant about hot teams usually can run the table in March Madness, so I'm going to go with the University of Michigan. I really like what Juwan Howard has done down there the past couple of years. They have a really good big in Hunter Dixon. He does very well at finishing at the rim and defensively, can block shots. You also got a couple good shooters in Isaiah Livers. He's basically Nate Johnson for Michigan. He's high volume 3 guy. And you also got Mike Smith, who can also shoot the lights out. They play pretty decent defensively. I just really like what they're doing. The Big Ten is a gauntlet this year with Ohio State and Iowa and Illinois. A lot of good teams to go through. I think they're very battle tested. And come March, I think they have a good chance to make a run at the championship.
As an inexperienced sports fan, I'm just going to go with Gonzaga since they're undefeated. Thank you, Joe, for that idea. It feels like the safest bet. Grace?
I'm also going to go with Michigan, just like Ethan said. I'm a huge fan of the Big Ten schools, so I think Michigan is looking pretty hot this year.
Rounding it up, I'm going to take Iowa. I'm about the biggest Luka Garza fan there is. I would definitely consider myself a passive consumer of college basketball, but Iowa's played some tough games this year. They're coming out for a really nice win. And I just think having, like Ethan talks about being battle-tested, anybody in the Big Ten I would consider to be battle-tested. There's tons of good teams there. So I really like Iowa, but I think Gonzaga's a good pick. And, I'm sure it's some team that we haven't mentioned that's going to end up winning. But
It'll be interesting to see. And now I think we should all wrap it up by saying if we think Xavier will make it to March Madness.
I think Xavier's going to make it. I don't see any way after the way they played against Creighton, they'll come out flat and lose both of their next 2 games. I think they're going to have to win at least one of the 2. So that'll pretty much punch their ticket. So I think they're going to be in.
I think energy's coming off really high from the Creighton game. They played very well offensively, very well defensively. If they can keep that up, both sides of the floor, they should be looking good against Georgetown and Marquette. And then pretty much should be a lock. Whatever happens in the Big East tournament happens. And I think Xavier's pretty set. They have a good roster, good coach in Travis Steele. Should expect to go dancing in March.
Yeah, I think Xavier's making it too. I think we have a fair chance against Marquette, and as long as things go well at Georgetown, I think we'll make it to March Madness.
I think the 2 games coming up the end of this week are really key in making the March Madness tournament. I think if Xavier can capitalize on at least one of them, we have a good shot of making the tournament.
I think if you asked me prior to the Creighton game, I would have definitely said no. I was waiting for them to really take it to a Big East opponent that had a good record. But, I mean, Xavier's been pretty consistent with teams that are worse than them. I feel like they've usually come to play for the most part, when they have not been involved with all this COVID stuff they've had to deal with. But I would say they'll probably end up making it. I would not expect this team to really go too far. I think there's been too much lineup flux, and I don't necessarily think that they've proven that they can be a cohesive unit, mostly due to COVID, but also just I don't think they've proven that they can be a cohesive unit against consistently good teams. But I do think they will make it.
All right, thanks, guys. Thank you to everyone who has contributed to this episode of Debate and Discussion, including Managing Multimedia Editor Hunter Ellis, Show Manager Will Pembroke, Acting Editor-in-Chief Alex Budzinski, guests Joe Clark and Ethan Brosnan, Campus Correspondent Grace Carlo, and XUFM for the use of their equipment and recording space. Don't forget to tune in next Wednesday, March 10th at 7 p.m. for our next episode of Debate and Discussion. And if you want to give a listen to our other show, Newswire Live, it airs every Monday at 7 p.m. From Xavier Newswire's podcast, Debate and Discussion, this is Erin Albright, signing off.